we got the theme of decoding the matrix, right? So, what is the Mandela Effect? What is the matrix? We've heard quite a bit about it this morning. We heard from Tom Campbell. We've heard from Roger Marsh. Now, ladies and gentlemen, current commonly accepted definitions of the Mandela Effect contain both mistaken assumptions and logical errors. Thanks to new findings from scientific research over the past several years, we can more accurately define what is meant by the term Mandela Effect, based on our ever-improving awareness of what the Mandela Effect is showing us. Cynthia Sue Larson is a best-selling author of several books, including Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and High Energy Money. Cynthia has a degree in physics from UC Berkeley, an MBA degree, a Doctor of Divinity, a second-degree black belt in Kuksulwan. I am glad I pronounced that correctly. Cynthia is founder of Reality Shifters, first president of the International Mandela Effect Conference, yes she was, managing director of Foundations of Mind, and creator and host of Living the Quantum Dream podcast. She's been featured in numerous shows, including Gaia, The History Channel, Coast to Coast AM, One World with Deepak Chopra, and BBC. Cynthia reminds us to ask in every situation, how good can it get? Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce my incredible board member and teammate, Cynthia Sue Larson.
Thank you so much. Well, I wanted to let you know the song that you may have heard briefly in the background. That was a song I co-wrote with Lisa Vivian, and it was also sung by Caleb Jose. So if it was too quiet, you can find it on YouTube. And I just want to mention that. It was How Good Can It Get? That's sort of my battle cry, my guiding question. It's a positive direction in the vision direction that Roger was just talking about. So today I will be talking about the science of the Mandela Effect, and thank you for the clicker. Okay, let's see if I get this right. Okay, this is about me. I have been a lifelong experiencer of this phenomenon, which did not have that name in the 1960s. In fact, it didn't have any name. And so when I was experiencing things where I would remember something differently than my family, than a lot of other people, I just felt like I can't play Trivial Pursuit when that game came out. It was pointless, you know? There's no point. I thought, why would anyone enjoy this? Okay, so I've been exploring the science behind the mind-matter interaction ever since I can remember. I started making it more seriously active after a Kundalini awakening, which happened in the 1990s. Took me 5 years to integrate, so by 1998, that's when I came out with this first version of the first book, Reality Shifts. Let's see if I get this right. Okay. So, yes, we just read through the topic today. You've got an example of the Mandela Effect on the left. This is C-3PO. What color are his legs? And to those of us who are familiar with this phenomenon, this is what we remember, I think. But apparently this was not always the case, and now one of the legs is silver. So these are the kind of things that we see. And scientists have been ignoring this because it's easier not to go into it. But I have noticed, and I keep looking for consistently, what is the leading edge of the science? I'll be presenting the best version of that I can today to show you, what can you see scientifically with the research that's come out very recently as far as the Mandela Effect. So these are the 4 parts of today's talk. I'll be defining the Mandela Effect, and then proving the Mandela Effect the best that we can based on the scientific evidence that's been coming out, talking about subjective observation, and then discussing a new paradigm. So I want you to just think to yourself, if someone were to ask you, what is the Mandela Effect? I'm pretty sure none of you would be referring to the Wikipedia page for someone that's asking you. Like, anybody wants to send them to Wikipedia? No, I didn't think so. But you can think, what would you say? And then here's an example of a cartoon. This is Ziggy by Tom Wilson. And the person saying to the therapist, well, actually, I think the therapist is saying to the person, I'm giving you a reality check. Do you remember Berenstein or Berenstain Bears? But so if you've got your answer, what is the Mandela Effect? How would you describe it to someone? A lot of us have some issues. We might bring up an example like this, may get shot down. So examples alone don't quite do it. Okay, now you can now look through the Wikipedia, an instance of false collective memory. Anybody like that definition? Okay, how about the first one? This is Forbes, a fascinating phenomenon in which people share a collective memory that never happened. No, okay. How about this one? Medical News Today. Widespread false memories that large numbers of people or a group of individuals believe. They may be harmless, but can also support conspiracy theories or political agendas. Anybody vote for that one? I don't either. Okay. Okay. Also, let's just do a few more. Psychology Today. They define the Mandela Effect as misremembering of an event by a large group of people in the same way. Anybody like this? Okay. How about Popular Mechanics? A consistent, confident, and widespread false memory. No. And their last one, an internet phenomenon describing shared and consistent false memories for specific icons in popular culture. These guys tried, I'll give them that, and I will be talking about their research, but I have to agree with you. No. Big double cross out. Okay. So what I'd like to do today is reclaim the definition. Talk about what is it really? If we know it's not these other things, what's wrong? Well, good science, we heard today from Tom, and he was discussing what are good theories, what's good science. It depends on making clear assumptions with awareness of pre-existing bias and suppositions. Now, it's been said that the only way to advance science is for the old scientists to die out. And there's a reason for that, and it has to do with these biases and the suppositions. And I've seen that firsthand because I know the hippies who saved physics. I'm currently asking these guys, could you endorse the book I've written about the Mandela Effect? I'm getting feedback and getting to see which of them really understand deeply this experience. And mostly it's going to be the people in what Roger was calling these truth bubbles. And it's also, there's the same idea that Tom was talking about. It's not that many, in other words. It is some, but it's not everybody. So the key problem that we saw in the previous definitions have to do with this assumption, obviously, that what we're remembering are falsehoods, or they're tied in somehow to some agenda, political or otherwise, some kind of conspiracy. And this is just adding unnecessary clutter to what we're actually observing. It doesn't need to be there. Remember what Tom said about simplicity. If you're making things complex, it's a mistake in science. And it jumps to gratuitous conclusions. So what we're noticing is hasty generalization, and that exemplifies one of the types of logical fallacy that exist. So to reclaim the definition of Mandela Effect, we need to recognize that hasty generalization where people just assume that if you remember something differently, you have clearly falsely remembered it, misremembered it, something's wrong with the memory. But what if that's not the case? Tom was noticing that he had some medication, that nasal medication that used to have 4 ingredients, now it has 1. That's a game changer. When you have a personal experience and you notice something has shifted, then you know it's happening. Okay, so this hasty generalization logical fallacy is one also known as secundum quid in Latin, and that is called jumping to conclusions. It happens when we don't have enough data. Maybe there haven't been enough experiments yet. We don't have enough people seriously studying this topic yet. But I predict that that's about to change. It's already starting to change. And so inductive reasoning is basically the case when you've got too few samples to prove a point. So you're reaching beyond anything you have experience in and assuming that this can never happen because it hasn't happened to you. And this fallacy has a beautiful definition given in Argumentation Schemes for Presumptive Reasoning by Walton, and describing this fallacy of hasty generalization. It needs to be understood not simply as a flaw or error in one type of reasoning, but as this kind of scalar fallacy where reasoning is pushed forward from one of 5 levels to another. What are those 5 levels? Here they are. So starting with the argument from example, this particular Mandela effect is a false memory. Now someone might say that if it hasn't happened to them. Particular claim is number 2. Some Mandela effects are false memories. And then you can just jump forward to the number 3, plausible generalization. Typically, Mandela effects are false memories. That's quite a jump right there. Some people jump all the way to 4, which is inductive generalization. Most Mandela effects are false memories. And then we've got universal generalization. All Mandela effects are false memories. We're currently working with this as our collective consciousness set point for Wikipedia and all these others. They're assuming all Mandela effects are false memories. Those are the definitions that are out there for the most part. But we're together here for a reason, and we can start to change all of that. We can have our own definitions. My definition to kick things off, and it's not the only definition, I'm opening it up. We can all participate in this. I'm just saying Mandela effect is a phenomenon of collective, alternate, or mismatched memories, where groups of people share different recollections than official history currently describes. Anybody like that one? Okay. And so my background, I've written some books. This one, Quantum Jumps, includes results from 2 surveys that I ran with hundreds of people. Now we're not jumping to assumptions or conclusions. We're actually looking at specific cases. Keep in mind, in 2000, when I first came up with the survey, we did not have the term Mandela effect yet. But I was calling it reality shifts. PMH Atwater called it reality shifts. So there was some consensus that there's something going on. And the things that you'll notice between 2000 and 2013, those 2 columns of numbers there, is that things like noticing synchronicity and coincidence is a very common experience. And I am considering that as part of this phenomenon that we're looking at. So in other words, if you think that things can change and you're reading your horoscope for the day and someone says, horoscopes never work. But if you think they work and you're reading yours for the day in the newspaper, it could be exactly what you need to read. And it might have been, I know it sounds crazy to say it, but written just for you. And that's where I'm coming from with my lifelong experiences of this phenomenon. You can find parking places where they're needed, witness things going missing, see people and animals heal after prayer, or be alive again. And I do cover that in my first book, Reality Shifts. Larry Hagman and a dead cat both came back to life before there was Nelson Mandela coming back to life. But before all of these, people noticed there was Jesus Christ who came back to life. And so if you look at all of this and you say, okay, this is a phenomenon that has been very long-lived. It's quite proven in some ways of our experiences. Time slowing down, stopping, and speeding up. I've had even weirder time experiences than that, but that's just what I put in the 2000 survey, so I kept it the same for 2013. Things moving without being touched. Business hours changing, doors locking or unlocking by themselves, things being transformed, bent spoons, keys, coins, or other. Seeing people, animals, and things appear, objects traveling distances or teleporting, and people, plants, and animals disappearing. So that was basically the survey. These are commonly reported things that I was hearing from people, experiencing for myself. And so it's nice just to have some evidence from hundreds of people, both 2000 and 2013, that were definitely experiencing a lot of these things. The ones up toward the top are more commonly experienced. And I did run a survey in 2005, again, before Nelson Mandela, before the Mandela Effect. I was asking people, have you noticed these celebrities alive again? Because it's part of the reality shift phenomenon. And Bob Keeshan, Captain Kangaroo, at that time was the most commonly reported case. Jane Goodall and Larry Hagman were tied in second place for having been remembered as having died. I totally remember Jane Goodall having died, so that was a big one for me. And then Bob Hope. I know these seem kind of out of date now, so you'll notice that as time moves on, 2005 was almost 20 years ago. So these may seem a bit weird. Jack Palance, B. Arthur, Ed Asner, Walter Cronkite, and Mariel Hemingway. So maybe some of you might have noticed this, but if you're new to the Mandela Effect, maybe not. I just want you to know this has been reported and surveyed. This is an example of Mandela Effect happening in England. And this is in the year 2006. People remembered, half the people in the town of Bolton, England, remembered this particular dinosaur. But they felt like it was missing. They felt like, okay, the museum must have taken it away to do whatever they do in museums. But it's been a long enough time, bring it back. You know, now I'm a dad, and I want to be able to take my kids to see the dinosaur that I saw when I was a kid. So where is it? And that's half the town remembering that this dinosaur was there. This is Django, the Tuo Djangosaurus. And I think it's an herbivore, but anyway, it looks a little like it, standing upright there. But the interesting thing here is that the Bolton Museum eventually buckled to the pressure because half of the people that were the town leaders, they're the ones that also remembered that they used to have a dinosaur that they never had. So that's a kind of interesting example. And this next thing I want to talk about is proving the Mandela Effect. Now we're starting to get into the science of it, because when we look at the personal experiences, that's interesting. But if you want to talk to people about it that maybe they're not sure, they're on the fence, how do you present information? These are the people that I was mentioning their quote about the Mandela Effect, that none of us liked what they said because they were using the terminology that assumes, it makes that leap to assumption that we're dealing with false memories, misremembering. On the left is Wilma Bainbridge. She worked with Depository Prasad. They were, at the time, working with the University of Chicago in the psychology department. And I'm going to go through some of what they found, because it's very interesting. And now you start to see that their paper was published in 2022, The Visual Mandela Effect as Evidence for Shared and Specific False Memories. So one of the things that they were noticing, they'd ask people which image is the real version. And you'll see that in they'll have the original, so the original C-3PO, the way that apparently it's always been, which looks kind of wacky. A lot of these are going to look wacky. Like if you're Mandela affected and you're just looking at that top row, it's like, that's not right, that's not right. And so then in the middle section is something that was an induced manipulation, which means basically it's just they did something to change what they call the correct image. They're looking at the top line of A as being correct. And then the second column, B, or row down, is just, it's got C-3PO with the gold legs. It's got the cornucopia with the, with the fruit, for the fruit of the loom. It's got the, the Curious George with his tail. The Monopoly guy has a monocle. Pikachu has a dark tail. And there's no weird little middle line in the VW logo. And then row C, the scientists and the researchers did sort of an altered version. They wanted to see, okay, if people are misremembering that middle row, then what if they change something else? This kind of, it could be some other random change. So they did that. Can't quite see what the C-3PO difference is, but I can tell for sure the fruit of the loom logo has a plate, a platter, that's been added. Curious George has like a squirrel tail. The Monopoly guy has glasses. Pikachu is missing the little black bit, toward the bottom of his tail. And the VW logo is a very subtle difference, but it has to do with the way the lines are drawn, and they're just a little bit different than original. Very subtle. Okay, so what happened with this? Okay, I want to show this chart because it's really interesting. It indicates that the researchers were capable of finding some very distinct cases where certain things, rather than others, were noticed to be quite different. So what you're looking for is that first manipulation one is what they're calling it, where they've altered what they call the correct image to be slightly different. When you see a big blue line and that little black arrow at the top, then you're looking at that Volkswagen logo and the Where's Waldo character, and they've got like 7 of these total. So these are the examples that people were consistently, quote unquote, misremembering, but I would change that assumption, because when you start putting that assumption in the research, you're jumping to a conclusion in a way. And for those of us who've experienced this phenomenon, this is great research, but we want to be able to say it's not misremembering, there's an alternate memory. And you can see it start to jump out of the data. You can see there's something going on. And this one's pretty strong too. They didn't really follow up on the Tom in Tom and Jerry, but that's a pretty big one apparently. The other ones that are big, I'm just going to walk in front, Monopoly Man, Pikachu. I know the font is kind of small, but this is showing just the difference in the percentage of people that are experiencing these things. And so here are some more examples of the experiment results. When they were looking at these 7 different things, you can see here's the Where's Waldo. That's the one we didn't look at before. And without a cane, with a walking stick cane, and with a red striped umbrella are the choices that people were given. So to skip to the results of the whole research project, what they noticed is there's a combination of what they say a true visual Mandela effect, showing that certain images elicit shared and specific false, quote-unquote, false memories. I'd say alternate memories instead of false. So I just want to make a correction to this based on what we are experiencers noticing, the surveys that I've been running with hundreds of people noticing this. So these 7 images have low identification accuracy. The chi-square tests show a specific representation was so-called false remembered. I'd say alternately remembered. The split half consistency analysis provides evidence of a specific incorrect choice is being highly consistent across participants. And permutation tests show that these 7, including that VW logo, have high familiarity and confidence despite what they call poor accuracy. Okay, accuracy, again, is that very presumptive word. So if you were in a court of law, you wouldn't want someone to be, pushing the evidence in a certain direction. And I don't think the scientists are yet aware of this other truth bubble or this other way of seeing things. But we're changing that. And I think the observers that were doing this research study were very surprised because they were asking people to draw these images. They would sometimes show them the image, and then a short-term drawing is done right after they saw the so-called correct image. And after they see the correct image, they're inserting, these discrepancies. For C-3PO, for, putting a tail on Curious George. Here he's got a tail. Here the legs are both gold. Here, it's like this case of nothing, there's no cane that the Where's Waldo guy is holding. And then the long-term drawings, similar situation. In fact, it seems like it gets more pronounced. Like the more time you give someone, the more likely they are to go to what we would say is normal if we're Mandela affected. So schemas of false memory, what they're calling the false memory, and I'm calling mismatched or alternate memory. Here's a quote from the researchers. It's unclear how such schemas of false memory are formed for the new image classes. So they're looking at why is it happening? Why are these people doing this? For example, and why just these things? Why these 7? What's going on? We'd all like to know. Okay, but they're wondering, for example, as Pokemon's most popular character, Pikachu is likely the basis for that schema, yet people falsely remember a black tip on Pikachu's tail. And then the other big thing that they came up with in their conclusion is source confusion of memory. So their other way of looking at it, another explanation, is that the VME is what they're using to talk about visual Mandela effect. These are visual Mandela effects, not auditory, not sensory. There are lots of types of Mandela effects, clearly. But they say another possible account for the visual Mandela effect could be source confusion of memory. Our image scraping results suggest that while uncommon, it is possible for people to be, and what they're talking about is surfing the internet. You're just trying to find an image of Pikachu, and you bumble into one of these Mandela effect memories where it's like, we would call it possibly reality residue is a popular term. So if they run into that, it's possible for people to have previously experienced the visual Mandela effect version, like the gold legs on C-3PO, the cornucopia for Fruit of the Loom. In this case, the visual Mandela effect error would not be a false memory, but rather source confusion, remembering the non-canonical version that they saw instead of the canonical design. Okay, that can happen, and I think Tom would call this pattern matching, perhaps. Fine. Okay, that's all well and good, but some aspects of the visual Mandela effect are not schema or source confusion, and the researchers noticed this. That's what really grabbed their attention, and that's why I like this study. Although these 2 accounts may explain some examples of the visual Mandela effect, there are results that neither can fully account for. Firstly, participants who made those visual Mandela effect so-called errors reported high familiarity, implying they had extensive experience with the canonical version. Secondly, we found that for most of the visual Mandela effect icons, 5 out of 7, the majority of the scraped images were the canonical version. So they can't, in other words, they're not getting influenced by what they surfed on the internet, and they are familiar with these things. So we show that the visual Mandela effect cannot be universally explained by a single account. So that's progress right there. I want to bring up the work of another psychologist, Anthony Jinks, And he has studied all sorts of things. He's got background in neuroscience, perception, parapsychology, and paranormal belief and experience. He wrote this book, Disappearing Object Phenomenon. And it's an investigation. And basically, he published it in 2016. And what he found when he was looking to see, is there a difference between people who've been, we'd call it Mandela affected, or they notice reality shifts, and people who don't? He was wondering, is there some sort of an error happening cognitively? Are they having mental problems? This is another way of putting it. He asserts they're not having mental problems. You'll be glad to hear. Okay. Hey, I know, a relief. I think most of us know we're not crazy, but sometimes when you talk to people, they have doubts. Okay, so Jinx asserts that experiencers are not suffering from such possible psychological issues as transience, telescoping, errors of commission, which include suggestibility, illusionary correlation, confirmation bias, or perceptual blindness, such as inattentional blindness, altered states of consciousness, such as hallucinations, auto-hypnosis, encoding errors, such as absent-mindedness, memory distortion for pre-existing beliefs, and loose association. This is a wonderful study, well worth mentioning, because what it's doing is showing that there isn't really any perceivable, observable, obvious difference between experiencers and non-experiencers. We have the same abilities, and we don't seem to have deficits that people might expect we would, or assume that we do. Okay, next up, subjective observation. And this gets into the idea of our individual units of consciousness. I forget the exact term that Tom was using, but that, and truth bubble is another way of looking at it. So I'm going to go through just some basics of physics just quickly. So I know you're familiar with most of these things. Those of us who've experienced the Mandela effect tend to dive right into quantum physics. And there's a reason for that. Because when we look at the double slit experiment, which is one of the most elegant experiments in all of science, absolutely. And there's so many versions of it. And what it involves basically is just the particle emitting device, some sort of like a double slit barrier in between the emitting device and the little wall or screen on the other side, and the observer. The observer absolutely matters. So what's observed with this experiment is that when photons of light are passing through the two slits, and the observer has a detector in one of the slits so they know for sure which one it's going through, well, when the observer knows for sure, then it looks like that image on the left, kind of like paintballs going splat, making sort of a very splatty kind of an image. However, when photons of light are passing through two slits and the observer doesn't have that detection device in either of the slits, then what happens is the particle of light, for example, so a photon of light, one single photon, starts behaving like a wave, like it's interfering with itself, creating a diffraction pattern that looks like when you throw two pebbles in a pond, but there's only one pebble thrown. It's like if you threw one pebble in a pond and then you see the results of two pebbles having been thrown in. That's what they're seeing, and that's really weird. The other huge experiment worthy of note and special mention is Erwin Schrödinger's cat experiment. So he created this experiment as sort of almost a joke. It was supposed to be preposterous because at the time there's this idea of superposition of states that was supposedly observed, that until it's observed, that quantum photon particle is both a particle and a wave. But as soon as you observe it, it makes a choice, which is very strange. So this picture is showing the cat apparatus itself involving this is an imaginary cat. No cats were actually harmed. And I hope nobody ever does this to a real cat. So this is not necessary. But there's basically the source of the whole random event is usually some sort of a radioactive isotope, which is contained inside of this device that then strikes it releases the hammer, which strikes the glass, which releases the cyanide poison. So when the cat is sealed in the box and nobody knows what's happening, we don't know whether that quantum random action has happened or has not happened, which results in the ridiculous situation of the cat being in a superposition of states. It's both alive and dead. And so this is a very big, 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 big idea. And it brings me to something that gets even bigger. So we've been talking about truth bubbles. We've been talking about these individual units of consciousness. I want to bring up this physicist Eugene Wigner. This is a big deal. Back in 1961, Nobel Prize-winning physicist Eugene Wigner devised a thought experiment to demonstrate a paradox from quantum physics. This experiment demonstrates how the cosmos allows two observers, such as Wigner and Wigner's friend, experiencing different realities. In 2018, this experiment was actually conducted in a physics laboratory with results published the first year that we guys all got together, 2019. So, Wigner's friend, what's going on? In this experiment, the scientist is observing Schrodinger's cat. So there's so you'll see the lady with the glasses looking at the cat. So she's the original observer, observing the cat in the box situation. And so we don't know whether she's opened the box and found the cat alive or dead, but then we're going to make it more interesting and bring in an observer of the observer. So you got the gentleman on the left watching. What happens when we do that? And in 2019, Laszlo Bruckner of the University of Vienna and Massimiliano Proietti from Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh, Scotland, they worked together and collaborated to prove, what happens in this case. So they actually conducted this experiment, and they showed that these realities can be made irreconcilable to agree on objective facts. So this is the first scientific evidence that I've seen in the whole 25 years I've been looking for it. Because that's what I've been doing. I've been looking to see when are we going to get some experiments that start showing this. This is one of the first I've seen. And basically what they came up with is there's no such thing as objective reality. And so basically what they're saying is this apparatus that they devised, it involves lasers, beam splitters, and photons. They've got 6 entangled photons that are being observed by 2 sets of devices. And what they noticed is that the 2 different observational devices could be at the same time, at the same place, with completely different observations. Now, is this starting to sound familiar? Yeah, I thought so. So the name of their paper is Experimental Rejection of Observer Independence in the Quantum World. Here's the little chart of the actual experimental design. These are the 2 pairs of Wigner's and friends arranged in 2 boxes, working with 3 pairs of entangled photons, which is 6 altogether. First pair represents coins, second pair perform coin toss. So they're measuring the polarization inside. And the third pair remains outside the boxes. I know this sounds very complicated, and there's mathematics and everything, but the point is that finally we're starting to see that there's apparently evidence in the physical world of what we've been noticing. I think this is huge. To me, that was the biggest news story of 2019 besides us getting together with our first conference. And so now these are the observations Proietti made about this research. He said some physicists see that these new developments are bolstering interpretations that allow more than one outcome to occur for an observation. For example, the existence of parallel universes in which each outcome happens. That's like the multiverse, right? Others see it as compelling evidence for intrinsically observer-dependent theories. I love these, such as quantum Bayesianism, and I can't get into all that in 45 minutes. So sorry about that, but I'll do it later, I'm sure. But in this case, an agent's actions and experiences are the central concerns. Bayesianism is a type of statistics where you've got probabilities even on what seem like certainties of true and false. So that's sort of in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it, but it's very cool. Yet others take this strong pointer, then perhaps quantum mechanics will break down above certain complexity scales. Okay, I'm going with number 2 personally. I like the parallel universe idea sometimes, but I'm just telling you where I am right now. Love the quantum Bayesianism. And getting into that quantum Bayesianism, who is leading the charge right now? This is a scientist most people don't know about. These are the ones I follow. I'm tracking where are the big ideas coming from. This is Eric Cavalcanti from Australia, and he suggests that if we reject the no-go assumption of absoluteness of observed events, then not all observers will agree about what events transpired. In this sense, the events that are definite for the friend but not for the Wigner could be said to be not in Wigner's space-time but occurring in a Wigner bubble. And now what does this sound like? The truth bubbles, what Tom Campbell's talking about. Love it. So where is this bringing us? This is basically a new paradigm, which I think we've been talking about all day today so far. What is a paradigm shift? That term was coined by this gentleman, Thomas Kuhn, and he stated that mature science experiences alternating phases of what he calls normal science, where assumptions comprising the disciplinary matrix, there's that matrix, are kept fixed, and revolutions, where we break the matrix, right? Where the disciplinary matrix is revised to allow for solution of otherwise anomalous puzzles outside the reach of the preceding scientific period. Spot on. He has a quote, all significant breakthroughs are break withs, old ways of thinking. And during that normal science period, scientists neither test nor seek to confirm the guiding theories of their disciplinary matrix, nor do they regard anomalous results as falsifying those theories. Anomalies during these normal periods are ignored or explained away at every opportunity. Only a widespread failure in confidence of normal science, such as what we're noticing in the pandemic, produces a scientific revolution. So maybe it's a good thing that we're having some hiccups. So does objective reality exist? And here's a little cartoon on the left. Two people are cartoon characters looking at a figure on the ground. For one of them, it looks like the number 6. For the other, it looks like the number 9. Just because you're right does not mean I am wrong. You just haven't seen life from my side. And then here's that classic image of, what are you looking at there? Some people see one kind of animal, others see another. And I was called for jury duty not too long ago. And I thought, if I actually talk about what I believe in, describe some of this stuff about quantum logic and how we don't really have these certainties that we think we have, I thought for sure I'll get dismissed. But I had a bad feeling when I looked up and I saw that the prosecuting attorney was smiling, and so was the defense attorney. I'm like, oh no. And then the judge leaned forward. He was the only one that looked really concerned. He got it, and he said, but you will follow the rules of this court, won't you? And my thought bubble was, did you not hear everything I just said? I said, yes, of course, but like with a Bayesian yes. I'm not going to describe that whole thing. But anyway, it was very interesting because I got selected, and then I was selected by the jury to be the foreman. So I want you to know. I know. Because this sounds wacky, right? But if you explain it with the kind of descriptions and examples and science that I'm sharing with you now, people don't think of you as crazy. And I was shocked. I mean, seriously, because I thought, this is it, no problem. Well, there was a problem. Okay, maybe it was good. Anyway, so what is this objectivity assumption? This is from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. They say scientific objectivity is what we all assume generally right now in the normal science. That objectivity is a property of various aspects of science. It expresses the idea that scientific claims, methods, results, and scientists themselves are not, or should not be, influenced by particular perspectives, value judgments, community bias, or personal interests, to name a few relevant factors. It's hard to read this with a straight face. Like, do you know anybody like this? I mean, I know scientists and they have biases. Okay. Objectivity is often considered to be an ideal for scientific inquiry, a good reason for valuing scientific knowledge, and the basis of the authority of science in society. So this, in normal times, this would fly. But good news for us, we're not in normal times. Okay, I co-authored a paper with physicist George Weissman. He was one of the hippies who saved physics. He's in the book by that name. And we wrote about the quantum paradigm and changing the objectivity assumption. Around the same time, Carlos Rovelli was also writing similar things. He's a genius, and he writes beautiful books that everyone can enjoy, like about time, and how there is no such thing as objective time or time that's the same for all of us. It does not exist. And he explains it in such a beautiful way, you can actually show that to other people too. Brilliant. But our paper was just diving into this and showing that the subject-object distinction has within the natural sciences degenerated into a dichotomy, an absolute split into separate realms, with scientists adopting the classical paradigm where the object pole of experience, so-called objective reality, can be studied independently from the subject pole, the experiencer. With a presupposition, this procedure yields a fundamental description of nature. The subjective is often eliminated altogether as a fundamental category and reduced to an epiphenomenon of objective processes. And Bernardo Kastrup, I mentioned him, he says one of the weirdest implications of quantum mechanics is different observers can give different, equally valid accounts of the same events. And here's that Carlo Rovelli he's mentioning that I just talked about. In Carlo Rovelli's relational quantum mechanics, this means there should be no absolute observer-independent physical quantities. You can see it for yourself if you read his book on time. All physical quantities, the whole physical universe, must be relative to the observer. That's the way it is. The notion that we all share the same physical environment must therefore be an illusion. Exactly what Tom Campbell was saying. Okay, Bernardo Kastrup's mental states are real. And then Philip K. Dick. This is great. Philip K. Dick is one of our early Mandela Effect experiencers, for sure. And he says, maybe each human being lives in a unique world, a private world different from those inhabited and experienced by all other humans. If reality differs from person to person, can we speak of reality singular? Or shouldn't we really be talking about plural realities? And if there are plural realities, are some more true, more real than others? David Bohm, he's the father of the holographic interpretation of quantum physics. He says the general tacit assumption in thought is if it's just telling you the way things are and that's not doing anything, that you are inside there deciding what to do with the information. But I want to say that you don't decide what to do with the information. The information takes over. It runs you. Thought runs you. He continues, thought, however, gives the false information that you are running it, that you're the one who controls thought, whereas actually thought is the one which controls each one of us. It's that being and doing thing. Until thought is understood, better yet, more than understood, perceived, it will actually control us, but it will create the impression that it is our servant, that it is just doing what we want it to do. That's the difficulty. Thought is participating and then saying it's not participating, but it's taking part in everything. Fragmentation is a particular case of that. Thought is creating divisions out of itself and then saying that they're there naturally. And now this is the Philosophia Perennius, and it's the experience of the absolute. And basically these lines leading up are different paths of explaining reality according to different philosophical or religious views. We've got Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, everything, Chinese traditional. They all just go up to this contemplative form. So it starts institutionally, where you can go find a group of people to talk about this. At some point, when you start having those near-death experiences, that engagement with that larger reality, that larger consciousness, it's a very singular experience. It's kind of like it takes you to that oneness. And that's how we can experience divine reality, limitless consciousness. And when we find ourselves there, there's an advantage in humility and asking questions we wish to live the answers to. And just like that song at the beginning, I like to ask the question, how good can it get? Because I think Tom was mentioning, the physicist, I think he was the one that mentioned Wheeler. And Wheeler talks about that participatory universe, where basically if you ask a question, nature answers, always. Especially when you ask with all the feeling and passion and desire to know what is the true nature of reality, you'll start seeing Mandela effects. That's just what happens. And you can use it. I wanted to make time to just share one thing. Hopefully it won't, this is at the end, so if it messes up the computer equipment, I'm sorry in advance. Okay. I just want to say, if things look impossible, I was in a 1,000-year drought in California. The whole western United States was, just last year. And just like what Roger was talking about, I just felt like, okay, I'm panicking about this. They're dropping fire insurance for my home. It's getting kind of bad. My parents left the state. My sister left the state. What's going on here? And I was sitting and meditating in the backyard, and I just got this sudden feeling, that heart-centered feeling, just sitting and communing with the redwood trees. There's smoke in the air. Everything looks kind of crazy. I'm thinking, all these fires, all this drought, this is crazy. But I felt like, okay, there's a team here. All of the redwood trees in California are my team. And this is going to sound maybe out there to those of you who don't know what this is like, but here we go. I'm going to show something. I hardly ever do it in front of technical equipment. Apologies. I'm going to ground myself. Okay. Hopefully this will fly. So what I did is I just talked with what you might call conscious agents of the weather systems. in communion with the redwoods and all the trees, not just in California, but across the entire Pacific Northwest, everything out into the Southwest. And then I brought in a Qigong movement, which is, I'll show, okay, here we go. Let me ground again. Full ground. I'm asking for guidance. Please let this work. Okay, so then I do this from the ocean. So I'm scooping from the ocean, and then I'm doing this movement. And it's a very, it's when you do Qigong, it's breath, movement, and imagination. Working at a level of conscious agency well above my normal human agency. And I did this back in October and November, and I'm just feeling like atmospheric rivers, bring it in. We were in that 1,000-year drought. And if those of you who tracked what happened next, it was amusing to me, because I'm watching the news, and it went from, you know, like, what's good? They were just always the drought, ration water, we're all going to die. It was fear stuff. Suddenly, it was just storm after storm after storm after storm. I also got feedback, how long would this be going for? I was hearing, is it okay if it rains through June? I said, absolutely. You know, longer than that? Yeah, sure, bring it in. And that's exactly what happened. So if you're wondering how to do this and you feel like I don't have friends, yes, you do. You've got trees, you've got nature. And we can do a lot more than we think we can do. So that's how good it can get. I've got lots more I could talk about, but I have to keep it short. So
Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Sue Larson. How good can it get? Well, I think it was a really good presentation. I know they got really good at least. But ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions? The microphone is open now for questions. I see somebody from the back of the room, couple from the back of the room coming on up. Come on, line up here, ladies and gentlemen. If you would like to ask a question, just kind of sit over here in one of these chairs, line up, and I will get to you one by one. Like our first guest here, you seem to be asking every speaker questions. I love it. You are so interactive.
I'll keep going if you guys don't come up here and ask questions.
Well, folks, what's great is he's a speaker also, so we can get him back later, right? We can all ask him a question. All right, go ahead, buddy. You're up.
All right, so I have a question and then a follow-up question depending on how you answer it, so it might be a little bit Schrodinger.
okay, yeah, sure. That's good.
So, in this experiment with Buckner, do you agree that nothing can be created or destroyed? That it can only be transferred?
You mean nothingness itself? I know, I'm not being playful like one hand clapping. I mean, nothingness can be, can nothingness be created? Can it be destroyed?
Well, the reason that I ask, it doesn't disprove the experiment at all.
No, but because you use the word nothing, and I love it, because that takes me straight to that divinity point, and so I love that. As a personal, I know that's probably not what you meant, but to me, nothingness is everything.
Well, and the reason that I asked that question is because if we have this cat,
Yes.
right, that we're both watching,
Right.
and you say it died,
Right.
and I say it's alive,
Right.
right? Where did the extra cat come from?
Well, I believe that would be like win-win game theory. So I believe that all those possibilities are open. We can all see how good it can get. We don't have to have someone win-lose. So I think it's kind of a different answer, maybe. But
Well, the reason that I ask is it's not because we can't both have a dead and an alive cat simultaneously. We're both standing there and we're like,
Yeah.
wow, a
Yeah.
dead and an alive cat. Awesome.
yeah.
It came from somewhere. And so my question has to do with origin.
But did it?
Yeah.
Because what's really changing? And I think that's the key. Is who are we and what level of conscious agency are we operating at?
So are we adding matter to our world, or are we taking it away?
I'm with Tom where he says matter is kind of illusory. It is kind of like an illusion. So the key, consciousness is fundamental. You can't get behind consciousness. And that's Niels Bohr that said that.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you, and I'm not going to take any up more any time.
Yeah.
It's just from Tai Chi and what you brought
yeah,
up,
yeah.
the idea is balance.
Yes.
And so when something like that happens, the balance shifts just a tightly.
It
You know,
can.
and it's something that is that tight. Could that have unintended consequences?
I believe in raising Indra's net, the whole web of consciousness, and that's not going to be a balance. It's like the balance is always changing, but we're raising it because consciousness itself wants to evolve. Is that exactly what Tom said? So I'm just agreeing.
And I'm fine with that too. Like I feel like we are expanding.
Yes.
And so there is a creation
Yes.
that's happening.
It is.
And so I'm not saying that at all. I'm just trying to lead into the question
Okay.
that I think a lot of scientists are probably going to ask too. And they're going to say, where did it come from?
They get
What's the origin?
confused. They don't look at who are we, and that's the biggest missing piece of everything right now. We don't look at the levels of consciousness that we each have access to. That was my example about the redwoods. and the weather system that seems out of control. 1,000-year drought, that's scary. But what if it's not, you know? So I believe everything's possible. People can have their terrifying existence if they want it, but we can also create something pretty wonderful, and we'll be experiencing that for sure.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
Thank you, Ted.
And thank you, sir. Next.
Awesome presentation. Wow, that was so cool. All right, so my question is regarding this concept that there isn't one reality, that we each have our own reality, which I totally accept. Okay, so I'm going to use the example of a Bible change that's very popular. Who laid down with the lamb? I've actually spoke to over 30 pastors now. Every single one of them, when I asked them, hey, pastor, who laid down with the lamb? Not only did they say lion, but they said it like it was self-evident.
Right.
Oh, the lion,
Yeah.
which means the recall is instant, and it's very high probability they're correct. All right, now, what we've experienced, I've done surveys, and basically the entire community experiences the same memory. But there was this one lady who had this experience, it was an anchor memory, where she swore 30 years ago in her Bible school, there was this big debate about the wolf laying down with the lamb.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so she was absolutely certain that she experienced that, right? So, but she shared all of the rest of the memories that the community shared as well. So what I identified was what I called a reality bubble,
Right.
or a time tributary.
Right.
So my question is, this is like a pragmatic question. So I can handle that, okay? But what I can't handle is if this young lady sees an egg on the floor and I see an apple, and we're both in the same room at the exact same time, and we're seeing two different things
Right.
simultaneously, that would freak me out, I think, a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So could you think of an example of where that level of disparity could be taking place, where we have two separate realities, but yet we're sharing the same space? Because that seems hard for me to grasp.
I think we'll be leading into experiences where that does happen. I think that's going to, I've heard reports from a woman who saw herself driving toward herself in the same exact
Yep.
bizarre vehicle with the strange things on top of the roof of the car. And she just did like, what the heck just happened there? So if that can happen, then of course you can have two people standing side by side. I have seen that kind of thing, and I describe it in my book, Reality Shifts, where I was at Disneyland. My elder daughter wanted to use the bathroom. I heard her ask me for the bathroom. And yet when I said, okay, I think we found one now, here it is. And she said, how did you know that I needed to use the bathroom?
Excellent.
And I said, because you asked me. And she said, no, I didn't. So I've been reporting that since 1998.
All right, so your answer is yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So let's stick around 1 second. Would this be the same as the philosophical concept of her dress is blue,
Yeah.
and we both agree that the color we're seeing is blue,
Right.
but the color that you're seeing through your eyes could very well be what I call green.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know that. We could be having two different subjective but objective experiences at the same time. Would that be the same?
Yeah, but I think the implications are ginormous. They're huge. I think that's what John was getting at. Like, where does this go? And
Right.
that would be the obvious question next. And it can go pretty big. So, I mean, it's huge. You can be standing side by side with someone, and what you think is happening is different for them.
Right.
I've actually seen that many times.
And that's been proven in laboratory, right?
That's what I just said. It was published the year that we guys first got together, 2019. Best news of the year besides us getting together.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question? Anybody? Come on up.
All right, super good. Thank you so much. My question is related to your experience calling in the rain. And I love your story as a young girl when you were wanting
yeah.
to show your mom that, hey, look, I can turn the rain on and off. So you've
Right.
had that capacity as a rainmaker.
Right.
And the heat was on because 1,000-year drought, it's hot. I'm a California native too. I was there at the same time. I was also calling in the rain.
Thank you.
So it was I had a similar synchronistic experience where I was like, I want an abundance of rain, but I don't want floods.
Right.
We had some floods in certain areas,
But
but
not
not
too
where I
bad.
was living. And
Yeah.
we just had lots of rain. It continuously came and came and came. And I'm like, wow, what a blessing. My intention is manifesting.
Yes.
So we were co-creating in that field, at least in my truth bubble. And I didn't know that you were doing that. But my question is this. So parallel realities,
Yes.
and our particular experience and our particular truth bubble, do you feel that if the cat is dead or if the cat is alive, it's only one or the other? It's not both and. And the way I would say that we might experience that is that some people are still experiencing a drought. There's a reality that's occurring in California where they're in the 1,000-year drought. They're still having that because their consciousness was cultivating drought, and they didn't have a qigong move and a fabulous team of rain,
Yes.
rain angels, we could call them, or a team. And so they are in that timeline. And I'll get to my question here in a moment, but just another simple example is that, with respect to tyranny and freedom on the planet, that certain people, we may actually observe there's tyranny and there's freedom, a lack of freedom for some people, but then yet I walk freely in my realm, in my bubble. And I can invite people in and say, yes, you can be in the world, but not of it.
Yes.
You can create your own freedom, even though we see people that don't have that capacity. How do these two realities play out, and do they overlap, or are they kind of one or the other, and how do you navigate that?
I navigate it. That's a great question. Thank you so much, Roger. And what I do is I focus on how good can it get. And that's a question I can share with everyone, even if they're in what seems like a negative bubble in a downward spiral. And they might feel like, this is a joke. I said, no, it's not a joke. I went through long haul COVID, and I came through that. I had hundreds of symptoms, and I didn't know where it was going. It was very much like the beautiful outline of 10 points that you made. Like, how do you get through this? How do you, when everything's really, truly falling apart and you might die, and you just get into that accepting mode, stay in your heart. And so I did that. And I know, going back to your question, like what are the implications here? Well, absolutely. We are in different worlds. We know that. At least I know that. What can we do? We can create something, a question like, how good can it get? Invite people to ask it, to get participating with nature, with reality at a level that they've never done. It's a very simple thing. And you can just say, like, yeah, you just start where you are. How good can it get? Yeah. Even if you feel like it's a joke, say it anyway. Start your day with that.
You're saying that, yes, you can be in your reality of
Yes.
whatever it is, and you can actually witness and see another truth bubble in another person in a different truth bubble. You're not in it, but you see it.
I can see it.
And then
yeah.
you can influence them and invite them up. You're saying both realities are occurring, two
Right.
different worlds,
Right. Well,
but you can see it.
Well, to some
So
degree.
it's kind of in your world
A
a
little bit. I mean, to
Yeah.
be honest, I don't always see all of it, and I wish sometimes I could see more of it, but it seems like it's a built-in situation where it's hard to really fully empathize with because I don't think I want to. I
And
don't
you
want to
might be in it. You might
Yeah.
call it into your whole reality
It could
as a
happen.
possibility.
Right, and I'd rather not do that.
Right. Okay. So observe it and invite it, but that can occur at the same time.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Sue Larson. Cynthia.